Hi everybody, in today's lesson we're going to talk about sample spaces and probability. This is Mrs. Pagan, so let's get started. Alright, we're going to talk about a probability of an event, and the probability of an event is a number between 0 or 0% and 1 or 100%. That indicates the likelihood of an event occurring. So sometimes we say things like, that's never going to happen. That is your way of saying that it is 0% chance that it's going to happen. So probability is 0. Now, just a quick reminder that today we're going to change some decimals into percentages. We do that by moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So it says, write each of the following fractions as decimals, round to hundreds, and then as percentages. All right, so remember hundreds is 2 places after the decimal. So when I type 40 divided by 100 in the calculator, I get 0.4, but since it's at hundreds, I'm going to do 0.40. And then it said to write it as a percentage, so I'm going to go ahead and move this decimal 2 units to the right, so that's going to give us 40%. That decimal ends up being behind the 0. Do the same thing for 4 over 5. We have 4 over 5 is 0.8, so 0.80. I'm going to go ahead and move it once, twice to the right, and we end up getting 80%. And 34 divided by 57 is 0.5 or 0.596, something like that. So we're going to go ahead and round that to 0.60. We're going to do 1, 2, and we have 60 decimal percent. There we go. So that's how you change fractions to decimals to percentages. These are 3 ways we represent probability. One is as a fraction, one as a decimal, and then the last one as a percentage. The percentage is the one we are most familiar with because everything that we do is in percentages, like our tests are in percentages, so we're more comfortable with that one usually. All right, let's keep going. Now it's talking about, it says you spin a spinner that has 4 equal sectors, colored yellow, blue, green, and red. So this is the shape on the right that they're talking about. The question is, what are the events of landing on blue after spinning the spinner? So if we look at the spinner, there's only 1 blue section out of the total of 4 sections. So our answer would be 1 blue section divided by the 4 total sections, which then would make our answer 1/4. Now, I know that as soon as I asked that question, a lot of you in your mind thought, or maybe even said it out loud, 1/4, and you were right. But we want you to get the idea of why is it 1/4, and it's because there's 1 blue section out of the 4 total sections. All right, let's talk about 4 vocabulary words and some examples. So the 4 vocab words I want you guys to be really good at is these: experiment, outcome, event, and probability, and the differences between them. So an experiment is a testing of trials to answer a question. So usually we get curious and we're like, oh, I wonder what this is. And then we ask a question and run an experiment to see if we can answer the question. For example, in the example I showed you above, spinning a spinner to land on different colors. That is my experiment. Now the outcome is all results. So the results could have been I could have landed on blue or on red or green or yellow. So those are all of my results. And then the event is what actually happens, the outcome that took place when I ran the experiment. So I take the spinner, like this one, and I spin it. And the question is, what happened? Well, it landed on blue. That is an event. It is one outcome that happened from result of running the experiment. And probability is the chance of how often the outcome will take place. Well, 1/4 of the times we will land on blue. So that would be my probability. I can predict that. Okay? So those are the differences. I'll kind of refer to these 4 words. So just make sure you understand the difference between the words, especially outcome and event. Because outcome is a listing of all of the possible solutions or possible results. An event is just one of them. Okay, so just know the difference between them. All right, let's go ahead further. Now, the probability of an event happening. So let's say that, hey, what's the probability of me getting green, landing on green? Well, it's basically the number of green sections to what I'm looking for, and it's always over the total sections. So in that case, it would be there's one green section out of the 4 totals, so even green is 1/4. All right, so that's a probability of an event happening. All right, so now let's look at this. This little tilde, it's like a squiggly line, means not. So if you ever see that, it's my way of saying not that. So this is sometimes called a complement and is denoted by a not. Okay, so if you ever see that, I mean, I'm saying things like, hey, what's the chances of you landing on the moon? If it's 2%, then what's the chances that you won't land on the moon? Well, it's the remaining of the 100, which is 98%. So it's the not, okay? So let's use some of the things. Now, we're going to go ahead and run this experiment in experiment 2. Basically, there are cards, 4 cards if you look at it, and each card has a letter on it, M-A-T-H, and what we want to do is answer the probability of any of these happening, okay? So the first one, it says, what's the probability of pulling a T? So there's 1 T out of the 4, so that would be 1 out of 4. Now, the probability of us getting a vowel. Vowels are, remember, A, E, I, O, U. So if I'm looking at the letters, the only vowel I see is an A. So that's 1 out of the 4 as well. The next question says, what's the probability of getting an M or a vowel? Well, here's an M and here's a vowel. So either one of those is good. So that's 2 out of 4 cards, which reduces to 1 out of 2. So half the time. All right, let's look at the consonants. So consonants are anything that are not vowels. So it can't be an A, E, I, O, U. So consonants are M, T, and H. So that's 3 out of the 4 cards. What's the chances of us getting an S? Well, I don't even see an S on here, so there is no chance. 0 out of 4. What's the chance that it's not a T? So M is not a T, A is not a T, H is not a T. So that's going to be 3 out of 4. So remember that the tilde means not T. Okay? All right, so I hope that wasn't too bad. Let's do this practice one more time with example 3. So now in example 3, they're saying we are rolling a 6-sided die. And here are some of the questions. What are all the possible outcomes? So remember that outcomes are all results. So I can land on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So those are all the possible outcomes. I'm just listing them. Now the question says, what's the probability that each number is rolled? Well, the probability that a 1 is rolled is 1 out of 6. The probability that 2 is rolled is the same, and same for all the other numbers. So it's 1 out of 6 for each of the numbers. What is the probability that 2 is not rolled? Which means I can roll 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So those are all good numbers. So that's 5 good numbers out of the 6 total numbers. So I'm just making sure that 2 does not show up. Okay, so then the question says, what's the probability of getting an odd number? Well, the odd numbers in that list from 1 to 6 is 1, 3, and 5. So that's 3 numbers out of the 6 total, which reduces to 1 out of 2. What's the probability of 1 or 2 or a 3 landing? Well, that's 3 numbers, so that's 3 out of 6 again. So that's half of it the time. What's the probability that a 7 is going to be pulled or is going to be landed on? Well, 0. Because the die doesn't even have, that's not true. It's out of 6. The die doesn't even have a 7. It goes as high as 6. And then what's the probability that it's not a 4? Well, things that are not a 4 are 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So that's 5 numbers out of the 6 total. So that's pretty much how we're going to be doing basic probability. Okay, so I hope that wasn't too bad. If you need to just rewatch it, go ahead and do so. If not, bring your questions to class, please. We're looking forward to seeing you. Have a good one. Bye.